is the Lydia Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl. It is the day after Thanksgiving, and I have to say this. I am
Yes.
thankful that we are no longer killing the indigenous people of this country, which
Is
is
that
obviously.
true though?
Well, the thing is this. Now we're trying to kill everybody else. Now that we wiped out most of the Indians, the American Indians, now we're going to try to wipe out all the immigrants, which is every one of us. By the way, how could an orange ass clown who thinks we need to get rid of immigrants, having married two, not know what the fuck he's talking about? I have to say, I'm enjoying these times immensely because I think it's such a shit show. I feel like the bullhorn has been to my lips forever. I don't know what else to say except for I am laughing hysterically as an intellectual sadist. And, as musicians or outsiders, of course, morally, psychically, even physically, we might be affected by these ridiculous, outdated 1940 to 1950 concepts by this cabinet that Trump wants to hire. But let's just say this: we just got to stick out. We're outside of it anyway. Is it really going to affect us other than, again, morally, psychically, physically? I'm not sure. But if it comes to this, I will evacuate as I've done before. But if I'm going to evacuate, I'd like it to be on fucking Trump's forehead like a crock of shit that he is. I'm just saying, I'm thankful to be alive and I'm thankful for Tim Dahl. What are you thankful for, my friend?
Well, the thing is, I'll take the literal meaning of Thanksgiving, which is being thankful for the people around me that I care about and who care about me. And one thing is, they're usually pretty giving people, so they actually stand by that real term. They're not thanks. They're not no thanks taking. They're literally the real meaning. Thanksgiving, and I,
Yeah,
I
both you
I
and
appreciate
both you
that.
and I, Tim. No, we have no problem, and we welcome thanking people and people that are also thankful because, look, this is what the true family is
Yeah.
the ones that actually respect and understand the blood, sweat, and tears you put into just your daily existence, especially as an artist. And we are surrounded by like-minded people like this. I can't name them all, but trust me, you are one of them, my friend Tim Doe.
Well, I appreciate that, and you are definitely one, and not just to me, but to many people on this planet. So I'm very thankful for knowing you, and I'm being
Very
sincere and
thankful for
earnest.
being me. I am so thankful for being. Let me thank you for letting me be myself as always. Because you do, because you, as we both do, allow each other to be as we truly are, with no filters or judgment necessary, because we understand that some individuals are just outside of all others. There are some states of being, some states of mind that are not in this time or any other time, but go beyond life and death, go beyond time, that
This
are
this
actually
this
eternal.
this monologue, the intonation, well, not the timbre, but the intonation, the phrasing, it was just, I had images of Macho Man Savage right there.
Thank you.
It actually sounded like,
Why are you giving away my secrets, motherfucker? I am so sad. I had Kevin Shea over here the other night, and we were so sad that there is not the sixth season yet of Dark Side of the Ring. I had spoiled that child on wrestling he never knew he was interested in. Yes, Macho Man. By the way, I might have been influenced by Macho Man Savage, but the Road Warrior stole my freaking costume from the Queen of Siam.
oh,
Hello, I'm
yes.
saying now. We did see Long Legs. Now, I do not like a Nicolas Cage, but I have to say, him looking like Genesis Pete Orridge's granny in the creepiest horror film I've seen in quite a while, I did subject Kevin Shea to that, and we did enjoy it. Yeah. And with that, I'm going to say,
Did you like the
oh,
Ultimate Warrior?
yeah. Oh,
Did you like
yeah.
the Did you like the Ultimate Warrior? Did you like the Ultimate Warrior?
No, I did not like the Ultimate Warrior.
Why?
Roddy
Too
Piper,
silly?
Road
Too
Warriors.
silly?
No, 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 no. My favorite actually is Jim Cornette, the wrestling announcer on the Dark Side of the Rings. No, no, no. And by the way, Mick Foley above all others because he
Oh, yeah.
was so ridiculous, and also he's such a civil servant. We need to get him on.
Well,
I'm not even.
Kawabata Makoto, because he's a wrestling fan, and the WWF slash WWE was very big in Japan, and he was a Mick Foley fan, back in the Cactus Jack era,
Tim
and was.
Dahl, if you know me, you will know who my favorite of all time is, now do you? And it is not these exaggerators. Come on, the best there
Oh, hold
was,
on, I do know this. I
the
do
best
know
there
this.
is, and the best there ever will be.
Hart? No.
That's the Hitman Hart.
Oh yes.
Because my first boyfriend looked just like him. Oh my God. Now, that is a true wrestler. That is professional wrestling at its finest. Now, his father, who I think had 7 sons, all wrestlers, or 7 daughters, also married to wrestlers, on a torture chamber. Bret the Hitman Hart, by the way, whose brother died, thank you,
Yeah.
Vince McMahon, another crime on your tail in the ring. Bret the Hitman Hart was
Who's your least favorite main
Hulk
event?
Hogan,
Yeah.
the
Okay.
Ultimate Warrior. I mean, there's too many to name. Come on.
All right. All right. All
Who's
right.
your favorite?
Well, it oscillates. I mean, I have my gold dust moments. I definitely have my Mick Foley
Yeah, now
moments.
that's very revelatory. You have your gold dust moments. Oh, yes, I do.
I mean,
Look, when your father is Dusty Rhodes, who's a Texas badass, and then your son eventually comes out as a gold dust makeup wearing boa, that is a feather boa wearing.
it's a Scandinavian black metal drag queen monster. I don't know what's going on there.
Well, Steve Austin, I must say, still holds a special place in my heart. But I mean, if you look up there, you go back to the Dark Side of the Ring and watch the Brian Pittman and Steve Austin, which was a home invasion set up because it's just too much to go into. Anyway, Steve Austin is still badass, even though he came out first as a Hollywood blonde. No biggie. I'm just saying.
Well, you
I'm
also
old
have a
school.
soft spot for the ones who've been hurt, like Jake the Snake. You
Look, I
actually
mean,
feel
Dark
for
Side
some
of
of
the
these
Ring, they've
guys.
all been hurt, they've all been murdered, suicided, steroid and drug addicted, prostitute ordering. I mean, I have to say, Dark Side of the Ring, one of my favorite series,
Oh yeah.
the best thing Vice has ever done. It's out there. If you want to really know what lives in my heart, besides Bret the Hitman, oh my God, I'm just saying Dark Side of the Ring. K-Shay, there's always a rematch. Yes.
Yes. And all right. Well, I guess this is coming out on Black Friday, so I don't know. Shopping, whatever. But
Well, you know what? This is the issue. Look, all these so-called tariffs that are coming, I have one word, and I've had this word forever. Don't buy shit. Trade shit. Thrift shop. I do a lot of trading with, the witches. We have the coven of trading. Like, don't buy shit you don't need. Then the tariffs aren't going to affect you. Just stop buying shit. All right? Stop it. You don't
good.
need it. You don't want it. And it's all disposable. So here we go. In the meantime, I'm thankful for you. I am thankful for Simon Slater for producing this. And on the 280 whatever episode this is, we ain't stopping. Because, oh, yeah, that's right. I'm going to pop into a Slim Tim. Watch out. I might just bite you the next time I see you. I'm just saying, all right, I'm frisky. Thank you, Timothy Doll.
Thank you.
This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and our guest today, Daniel House, who was an instigator on the Seattle grunge scene, not only with his band Skin Yard, but with the takeover of CZ Records, which released a lot of influential bands, which we will go into in great detail, and is blessing us with the revelation that a box set called Skin Yard Select, which I just listened to, and the mastering and the sound is great, which calls from their 4 albums from back in the day. So welcome, Daniel House.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
When is this coming out?
So it's all stuff pulled from our records from 1985 through 1991. We did find one song that we completely forgot about that was from the recording sessions from the very first record, which that was kind of a revelation to find that. And that's when Matt Cameron was our drummer. And then there's a couple of remixes that are brand new to this collection. And then there's a couple of alternate versions as well. And then the whole thing, of course, was mastered by our guitar player, Jack Endino. And yeah, it sounds better than I would have imagined considering the
I
format.
can't say that I'm familiar with all of the original material, but I can say that I was very impressed that culling from a variety of different albums, that the sound was really good, the mastering was great, and the material certainly holds up. A few of the songs kind of reminded me a little of Oxbow, Eugene Robinson.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was a fan back in the day.
Oh yeah,
Sure.
me
I
too.
think I was the only one in the band that was probably an Oxbow fan, but
Might have been the only one in Seattle who was a friend of Oxbow. But I mean, I just played with Eugene in Seattle spoken word. He's a very good friend of the podcast as well.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, because the music of Skin Yard, for those that don't know, but you should by ordering the set before it sells out, is it's heavy, but it's not oppressive. There's no happy tracks, but it's varied, which is also good. But there's just something kind of also groovy in there, which I do prefer a bit of groove in my music. You say?
I,
I
I,
review.
I think that's true.
I mean, there's definitely a stepping stone element to it because you're talking about where that movement in Pacific Northwest ended up going with grunge and all that stuff. But you're also hearing, at least I the way I was hearing it, you're also hearing some SST in there, alternative tentacles. You're hearing
Yeah,
that West Coast vibe.
yeah.
That's obviously part of the zeitgeist of the time. Did with someone like Matt Cameron, who's made it pretty big.
But
It,
Soundgarden.
does he with a lot of different things? But did he when you
Sometimes.
release this with the new release of this and older material with him? Does he is he okay with that? Is there did anyone that participated try to renegotiate, obstruct, or did everyone just say, "Hey, let's just do this"?
I'm laughing because there's nothing to renegotiate, right?
Okay.
I mean, the band broke up in 91. Um, we almost did big things like all of our contemporaries at the time, but we never quite did.
That's
Um,
why you're here with me. I understand the
right.
situation
Yeah.
completely. Hello.
So,
Somehow,
we
somehow, here we are.
we were when we broke up, we broke up in 91, which was the year that everybody broke, right? So our timing was absolutely impeccable. And and I mean, at the time we broke up, we were finally at the point where we probably could just barely make a living if we made it our full-time job, which probably would have meant being, on tour like 4 to 6 months out of the year. And I don't think any of us really like wanted to be on the road 4 to 6 months out of the year. It's just it's grueling. It's a grueling existence. I mean, I know you guys know this already, right? And some
Well, I've
people
never
love
been.
it.
Well, I mean, when I go on tour, it's in short spurts, and it might end up being
Right,
4 months, 1 year. But I certainly have never been on like a nonstop 4 month tour because I'm always diversifying, and also there's just not that many gigs out there for the kind of things I do. But
right, right.
exactly, exactly. No, I mean, when I think of some groups from that period, I mean, the touring was relentless, and they were able to do it. And you pound it into people's heads long enough, it might finally penetrate. But we
Yeah,
go.
you hope. But, I don't know. We kind of ran our course. But yeah, there's really nothing to renegotiate. And in terms of like, I mean, I think Matt's happy just because Matt's a happy person. And between Soundgarden and Pearl Jam, I don't think that, he needs an extra $43 from us. Um, our
Kind of
second
have to consider that. Yeah. Thanks,
our
Val.
second drummer, Jason Finn, I'm pretty sure got pretty wealthy off of his success with the presidents of the United
In the
States.
United States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thought our third drummer is the only one that probably just went back to, like blue collar work, but from what I know, he's doing pretty well. And then Barrett, our final drummer, he's kind of all over the world producing music and playing. And, I think basically every person that went on and did other things after Skinyard did better after Skinyard than they did with us. Because
But you pop their cherries.
yeah, we did pop their cherries. And it was like, we were doing this shit in like 85, 86. Like,
Hmm.
you know,
But
like
I
back,
mean, from your description, I mean, skin yard, because when I hear it, I don't automatically think grunge, which,
right?
did inspire a lot of grunge. But I just think it's like, which is something I always long for. It's like good, dirty groove rock music without being stupid.
No, we were definitely not big dumb rock. We were never that kind
No,
of three
but
chord.
it's thick.
Yes, yes, we were thick. I mean, our goal is, I think, just to be heavy and to be kind of tribal, uh, to be more complex in terms of just having a cerebral component. and to be interesting. I think at the time we were maybe doing something that became relevant probably years after the band broke up.
Sometimes it only takes 40 years.
Which is, it only took us 40 years, which is, I mean, that's fine, right?
I mean, hello, some writers take 300 years and their death. So what are you going to do?
Right.
What was, did you grow up in Seattle? I mean, you were pretty, fairly, you were a little older than a teenager when you started doing it, but where did you grow up and what was your first instrument that you were giving? Because you do bass, you do drums, you do all kinds of things.
I always say I grew up on the West Coast, because I'm originally from the Bay Area, from Berkeley, and when I was 8 years old, I moved from Berkeley to the other side of the bay. I left my junkie mother and moved in with my alcoholic father.
To Richmond?
It was to San Francisco.
Okay.
And then I lived with him between the ages of 8 and 15. And during that time, we lived in 7 different places, constantly
Thanks,
moving.
Dad. Thanks,
Kept
Dad.
going further north up the West Coast and eventually to Washington. And then we were on this little island north of Anacortes called Guaymas Island. And he was like, I'm moving back to the area. I'm like, God damn it, fuck you. And at that point, I'm 15, and I'm just like, I'm going to move back with my mom, who at that point wasn't a junkie anymore. Well, she was. She was a methadone junkie at that point.
Well, I mean, which is preferable sometimes, usually, in liquid handcuffs to, yeah.
But, so at that point, I could just be independent. And eventually I moved back to the Northwest because my best friends that I had left when I was 15 had since moved to Seattle. And then after high school, I went up to visit, and I'm like, I felt like this is where I was meant to be. So
did having parents that were alcoholic and drug addicted turn you off of those things or encourage you to go deep as well?
Sort of both, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
I've always, a lot of my 20s, I certainly, and probably into my 30s, I drank a lot more than I ever should have, but I was always very acutely aware of that tendency. So I was always kind of paying attention. And then at some point I just quit drinking, like 9 years ago or so. I just said, I think I'm done. Like it's no fun anymore.
It's exhausting too. If you're overindulging, I mean, it can just be exhausting.
Yeah. And at this age now, I can't even imagine it. So I moved to Seattle when I was 19, like a couple months before my 20th birthday. So I turned 20 there, I turned 30 there, I turned 40 there.
And that was enough.
So it was 22 years, but I feel in a way like, yeah, that's where I grew up, right? Because those are pretty big years.
Do you feel like you had to be parental to your parents who were fucking up? Did you just want to be a kid? Like, come on, get it together, assholes.
With my mom, sometimes I did.
Yeah, yeah.
It will drive me. I was just so with my dad, I was kind of living in more communal hippie kind of environment. So good thing about that was there was always a number of adults around. So you didn't have to rely on a single adult. There was other people that could kind of pick up the slack when, there he is falling downstairs drunk again, So.
And no siblings?
I have a half sister who's 20 years younger than me, but we don't really have much of a relationship. So,
I mean, eventually the family you want is the family you choose, is the family that serves you best. Come on.
And that's the family I've had for, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that was an important thing to realize at a very young age is your blood family isn't necessarily people you need in your lives, There's too many interesting, smart people, who do things that pique my interest and sort of bring more qualitative good stuff into my life.
Get you, actually. I mean, parents don't always get you. So what was the first instrument you picked up?
Originally guitar. And I was always a super shitty guitar player, but I worked so hard. I took lessons, I bought books, I listened to songs, I figured things off of records, and I just always sucked. And when I went to Seattle, the only thing I knew is that I wanted to be in a band and I wanted to play original music, and I didn't know how to do it, but I was going to do it. And then like my friend Tom, one of the 2 friends that I moved up to Seattle, eventually moved there for, he was in a band. And I'm like, what the fuck, dude? You don't play an instrument. What do you mean? What do you mean you're in a band? And I was so pissed or jealous or envious or something. And so I'm like, hey, do you guys need a second guitar player? Because every band with a guitar player wants a second guitar player, right? And Tom's girlfriend was playing bass in the band, and she was terrible. And she pretty quickly figured out she was terrible. So she quit, and I'm like, hey, I'll play bass. I'll play bass. I'll buy a bass. And then I suddenly discovered that while I continued to suck at guitar, bass was a very, very natural thing for me, which was very cool. And I think the whole melodic approach made more sense than kind of approaching music quarterly. And then it made sense when I started thinking about all my favorite music. Like so much music I like so much is like 60s and 70s funk and
Tell
soul,
us, give us some
R&B.
names.
And then
Yeah,
you go,
what was
listen
your
to-
influence? Tell us for the 60s and all that. Tell us what.
Well, I wouldn't call them influences to the music I write, but somewhere in there's an influence to how I think.
Right.
So, like Sly and the Family Stone and all the Motown and Stax stuff, like all the bass work you hear in there is just impeccable and amazing. And there's just so many, it's the root of so much of that music,
And it's also sometimes innovative. So you're Bay Area. I mean, that's Larry Graham. Larry Graham. I mean that's literally innovative approach to the bass. And it was interesting. I was reading this article, not in the R&B or funk style, but you're talking about melodic as opposed to chordal. Although, of course, James Jamerson with Motown he was pretty melodic in his chordal approach. Actually, now that I think about it. But one thing I heard is that often with Paul McCartney, the bass would be the last thing overdubbed. So all the harmonies, all the singing was kind of the influence of why he had that kind of melodic approach, because it would be the last thing which is such a bizarre approach. But anyhow, so okay, so you got a bass.
McCartney was probably also influential to me, even though I didn't realize it. Because
what was?
Paul McCartney. Because I grew up as a little kid, like every Beatles record my mom had, and every Beatles record I knew front to back, And so all of that kind of seeped in, without ever consciously.
Play the White Album.
Oh yeah, you bet. I played them all.
All right, I'll stick with that one for the Beatles for me. But
so what when I got a bass? What bass was that? What bass did you find?
I got my first bass was a Kramer with a weird aluminum
neck.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
One of those.
So and I mean the neck dive, those things were not a Travers Bean. It was like you had to kind of hold that thing up, right? Was it a terrible neck dive, or was it fairly well bound?
I didn't have it for that long. Pretty soon I'm like, I want a Fender P. What I really wanted was a Fender P with a jazz neck.
All right, that's a thing for sure.
It's thinner and it's a faster neck.
Yeah.
So you join your friend's band and
we sucked. We were called Death of Marat. The painting? You know the painting. So we were called Death of Marat, and I think I lasted about 9 months. I'm like, this is ridiculous. We had really lofty ideas, and none of us really had the ability to pull any of it off. So it's just this really bizarre kind of art punk chaos, which I guess the description could be really appealing, but it wasn't to me.
But you're getting your groove on.
What's that?
You're getting your groove on. You got to start somewhere.
It was a seed. It was the first seed. But after that, I was in 2 bands that I felt a lot more accomplished and kind of, I played in bands that really allowed me to grow a lot more as a musician. And in 1984, I was in a band called 10 Minute Warning, which was a big deal band in Seattle in 1983. It was the last band that Duff McKagan was in before he went to LA. And then when Duff and the bass player left, I joined the band and we became a 5-piece down to a 4-piece. And we actually recorded a record in 84 that I actually just released 3 years ago, finally, after all these years. And it's good. And if you want to send me an email, I'll send you copies if you guys listen.
Fantastic.
So Duff McKagan wasn't really playing bass until he went to LA. So what you're saying? Duff McKagan was not really playing bass until he went to LA, is what you're saying.
True, but Duff played everything. Yeah, he was a guitar player in 10 Minute Warning, but even before that, he had played drums in the Farts, and he had played drums in the Fastbacks. And
okay.
Duff can pretty much do whatever.
Okay.
But so I played in 10-Minute Warning at the same time I played in this instrumental three-piece, actually with Matt Cameron on drums, called Feedback. And we were kind of doing this arty sort of proggy thing, and nobody liked what we were doing. So when both bands like imploded, I had this idea of wanting to try to do this amalgam of sort of the two aesthetics of the band, of the two bands. And that was kind of the idea going into Skin Yard.
So I'm going to ask.
One second, Tim. So Skin Yard, so Beatles, all that music, Motown. Before, when you're a kid, you're listening to that. But then, what music was actually when you're more as a teenager? You know
Okay.
what the scene's going on. What was inspiring you then? What were some of the groups you were into?
Well, when I was a teenager, like when I was in high school, I was kind of a all into prog and jazz and a lot of fusion, like all dirty words for the most part, right? Not to me still, because I don't think there's any such thing as a dirty word when it comes to music you like. Like, who cares?
Right.
But
Tim's very prog and jazz and all together. So
I
we
mean, I
understand.
grew up listening to a ton of jazz with both my mom and both of my parents played a lot of jazz. So I
So
grew up
like what? Ooh,
like Miles Coltrane, Eric Dolphy, Mingus is one of my very favorite
Mingus. Yeah.
musicians. I don't even
Well,
think
Eric
Mingus
Dolphy,
in
right?
terms of
Exactly.
him being a bass player. I'm just like Charles Mingus, everything, the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But all that stuff. But then moving to Seattle was a real, that's kind of when my consciousness sort of exploded in terms of all the discovery. So all of a sudden I was still listening to some of prog and jazz and whatever, but all of a sudden now I was listening to Bauhaus, and I was listening to Killing Joke, and I was listening to Susie, and I was listening to,
magazine.
oh my God, Magazine. Fuck
No,
yeah.
but
Oh,
so Daniel,
magazine.
Still one of my favorite bands of all time. Yeah. The
I
correct
was
no, no,
fortunate
so
enough to do two tracks with Barry Adamson, who
really.
was still one of the most. I mean, his solo albums also, but an amazing magazine were, of course, fantastic. Who else?
Oh
Name.
God. Early Ultravox. There was two bands in Seattle at the time, the Blackouts and U-Men. Like those two bands just completely changed how I thought about
so
music.
Daniel, I was going to ask this because it was actually before Lydia actually asked you about the influences and the jazz and stuff. I mean, one of the narratives, of course, of punk and all that stuff was it was a rebellion against prog rock and classic rock, the big productions. So as you're moving to Seattle and all this stuff is brewing, was there a disconnect between bands like Heart, who made it, that were just who are a big part of the community there, right? But they're like
Yeah.
this massive arena classic rock band. Or what did Seattle look like? Was there like a line in the sand culturally, or was it just kind of like we just live here and it's just all amorphous and bleeds together?
I'd say like in the early mid 80s, it was very amorphous. And it's kind
Okay.
of what I liked about it. Like early on, it was really fun because you'd have shows where instead of everybody like, here's a punk bill, here's a rockabilly bill, here's an electronic music bill. Instead, it'd be like, here's a show with an electronic band, uh, a hardcore band, and maybe a metal band, or maybe like they mixed all this shit up. And
Yeah.
it was really fun because there was no, you weren't in the scene where everybody had to sort of align with this subsect or this subsect. But once things started to kind of become more popular, all of that factioning suddenly seemed to start happening. So
Interesting.
you kind of had to, pick your team. And I never believed in that. I never believed in that musically in terms of what I listened to, because the more the better. And, why do you have to pick one lane?
Why do you think a band like Soundgarden or even the Melvins, I mean, got so huge? I mean, I know the Melvins are relentless,
Yeah, they are.
relentless touring monsters. And their music, I mean, appeals to, I don't even know who, but a certain, no doubt, audience that's quite larger than anything we've ever done.
Yes.
But how do bands that came out of Seattle, like Soundgarden, or Pearl Jam? I mean, I guess Pearl Jam, because it's so like, to me, college, not so dumb frat boy rock. So there you go. Then I have to admit, I did kind of like Jeremy. I mean, I don't
No, Lydia, please.
well, I'll tell you why I liked it because of the message. It's about some, come on, he
Right.
had a bit of a message there. I'm not gonna come down on Eddie Vedder because he was political and had a message because he was and he still is, and they're
No,
still fucking huge, and I don't know how they do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard not to feel, whether you like the music or not, it's really hard not to feel, at least to me, an immense respect for for Pearl Jam, just in terms of like who they are as people, what they stand
Yeah,
for. You know, they put their money where their mouth is. Like they believe in shit and they go foot forward with
right.
that
And
agenda.
to
Big
me, they're
deal.
like the anti U2, who I hate
Yes,
completely. I
right.
are
really
they? Are they? All right. Well,
because
but
oh, hang
Soundgarden
on,
was.
let me just finish because they do, whether you like the music or not, which I find kind of boring, but that doesn't matter. I do feel that there is some kind of soul within this man or the
Yeah,
band that
yeah.
actually means that they mean what they mean, whether you like it or not. And they went for it. And somehow I guess the flannel shirts were popular. Who knows why or how anybody, no matter what they are, gets big anyway. It's all a fluke. It's all down to whatever. We don't even know. It's a mystery in some points, but
Yeah.
I can't say I hate them as much as I hate a lot of other cut rockers.
I'm sort of indifferent, but everything you just said about Pearl Jam, I agree with entirely.
It
You know, and
wasn't.
again,
Didn't,
I'm
go
friends
ahead.
with a few of them. Like I'm still good friends with Matt and I'm friends with Jeff.
Yep.
And you know, I got to tell you, they're like a couple of the nicest people you'll ever meet, and a couple of the
Hmm.
most genuine and sincere people you'll ever meet. You know, that's
There we
important.
go. It's
What,
important.
correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel. It wasn't like the early Soundgarden, at least image wise, kind of toying a bit with the glam metal LA thing. At least I remember seeing some old
No,
photographs. No,
uh, uh, Alice in Chains were.
Alice in Chains were okay.
Alice
Yeah,
in Chains used to have a Z at the end of Chains, and they actually
okay.
full on spandex and the hair
That's what I was.
and the big headbands and like yeah,
Right,
they
right, right. That's what I was
full
thinking.
I
on.
Yeah.
must admit I've never heard a single Alice in Chains song because they just seem like not my thing anyway. But oh, whatever. Another band that mysteriously got huge until they didn't.
They're kind of huge again. I gotta say, I'm a huge Alice in Chains fan. I think they're amazing.
Well, maybe you can recommend some of the songs to me that I might actually, because I'm not against listen. And look, I will listen to anything just to prove myself right or wrong. I
Sure.
don't
I
know.
think because it's interesting. They got
I
on that.
prefer Alice Cooper to Alice in Chains. I'm just saying.
They got on that big thrash metal Metallica Slayer Megadeth tour, which was kind of out of place, but
Yeah.
it's kind of what made them internationally put a huge spotlight on them, at least. I'm sure they already had a massive following in Seattle, but um, which seemed like, but they were pretty grungy at that time. So I was like, how's this fit? But they have
Well, I guess it
metal
depends on,
roots.
I guess it depends on what you mean when you use the word grungy.
Yeah. Well, the generic marketed mass, big
I mean,
label definition.
they're grungier than Pearl Jam,
Yes, sure.
whatever that means, right?
No comment.
So,
Anyway, so go ahead.
so what about Nirvana?
What
How much
about
inter-
Nirvana?
how much interaction do you have with those guys?
Oh, a ton, a
A
ton.
ton.
I
Yeah.
mean, I was friends with all those guys. One of the first shows they ever played was opening for us. You know, our guitar player Jack Endino recorded their first demo with Dale Crover on drums and recorded their first record on Sub Pop. And we were actually the weekend after we recorded that very first demo, we had a skin yard practice, and he came in and he goes, hold on, I can't do my proper like uh, my baritone Jack Endino voice, but he was like he brought this tape and he was animated, which is not like a default way to see Jack behaving animated, but he was like, dude, you got to hear this tape. I just recorded this band. They're fucking amazing, man. So he put it on and we literally sat down and listened to, I don't know, 6 songs, 8 songs. And we were all just by the end like, fuck, it was immediate, right? It was
Yeah.
unquestionable. Nobody had ever heard it. Like we're one of the first people to ever in Seattle hear this demo before Jack and before John and Bruce at Sub Pop or anything. And we were just like, shit, let's get them on our next bill. And so we offer them a show and they're like, oh, we can't make that date. And we put them on the second date after that. So I think we gave them their second Seattle show in '88. Um, you know, and at
What do you
first,
think, Daniel, knowing them and having seen them come up from the second show they did?
yeah,
What do you think was that golden nugget that Nirvana actually had? The same way we were discussing, like Eddie Vedder has something, whether you like the music or not.
yeah,
Kurt
yeah,
Cobain, we know he had something. And I mean, I
yeah.
think, it's just the soul ache to me is what was so beautiful about this torture guy. But I mean, what do you think that nugget was? You heard it and you're blown away. You hear it, you're the first one to hear it.
Mhm.
What's going through your head? What are you thinking? Like, wow,
Well,
what?
to me, Nirvana was just, it was immediate, it was organic, there was nothing pretentious about it. And I think you calling it soul ache really was because it just hit you square right in, you just felt it. It's to me, it's kind of there's a sincerity. I hate that word sincerity, but there's something genuine and organic about it in the same way that whether or not you like him or not, Neil Young.
Right.
To me, I kind of in my mind I equate
You
Nirvana.
can't look. There's some songs both from Nirvana or Neil and whoever that you can't say are not just soul crushing classics.
Yeah, but it just hits you immediately. Like you don't have to think about it because you just feel it and you understand it. And that's to me, that's how Nirvana was. You know, it was there was just kind of a direct, raw, emotional quality to it. Um, you know, and at first live they were actually really timid and kind of seemed afraid of the mic and that sort of thing. But the power of the music was there. And it didn't take long before they were just destroying stages and feeding off of that frenzy and that energy from the audience.
But because you also felt that ultimately they really didn't fucking care. They were just doing what they were
Yeah,
fucking doing. And I mean, two things I have to mention: the ugly fucking sweaters, kind of a mark of whatever. And I also have to say, there was a slight bit of, I'm thinking Gene Spirit, absurdity in the lyrics, which
mhm,
not done any better than when Weird Al covered it. And then you really see, like, wow, there is some absurdity in here that even makes it slightly more special because it's kind of freaking weird. The original lyrics, or as adapted by Weird Al, let's say.
yeah, yeah, you're right.
Let's face it, Weird Al is never going to cover any of our songs. I'd love to have him, but he ain't going to do it. Just saying.
Is
So,
any,
not, so then, as
have
you're,
there been any Teenage Jesus and the Jerks covers? Has anybody covered?
I dare anybody to learn how to play the guitar that I did not know how to play, but somehow, and I figured out what the secret was, but I can't say it. The more somebody knows how to play the guitar, the
Uh-huh.
less they can do it. I've
Yeah.
done a few reunions, and one of them was under the auspice at El Tomorrow's Party of Buzz of the Melvins.
Uh-huh.
He invited it, and that's when I had Thurston Moore and Jim Spaloonis, or as I described, the Twin Towers and Building 7, because they were 6'7" and I'm 5'4".
Right.
But no, no. I mean, very accomplished guitar players, they just don't get it.
Right.
Tim actually did one show, and it's funny because actually he played drums, and he had to be taken his hands because he knows so much about music, like a monkey, because the drummer was not a drummer, one snare. Tim had to be taught like a monkey how to play the drum.
The
It
well,
was
drum.
see, that,
to me, I thought it was an insult of his musical intelligence, but then again, isn't that what teenage
no,
Jesus
no,
were?
the idea was Lydia didn't want to rehearse a lot, but if you're a musician and you can remember forms, it's like, well, how about we just make the instrumentalist play the wrong instruments? So then if you remember it, and then sounds like you're a beginner, so it kind of worked out actually.
Well, that was part of the aesthetic, right?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. That was the
Well, but the
aesthetic.
thing is, the aesthetic was such that if you're going to be so visionary and non-musical, you better be tight as a fucking drum that's ill-tuned, which the Teenage Jesus was. So you got to be dumb enough, you got to be smart enough to play dumb, and you got to be tight. So that was a prerequisite, and that meant the original teenagers would rehearse every fucking day and be
really?
beaten if they got it wrong. He just had to dumb down Tim Dahl on drum. It was amazing. I thought it was an insult to his intelligence, but I can sometimes do that because
Well, I've
Well, I
never played a professional drum gig, but that one paid better than most drum gigs I've known professional drummers play.
I believe in the aesthetic of rehearsal myself, but
Yes, of course.
I
well, you
remember
know
one
what? I
time.
believe in the aesthetic of knowing the fucking music so that you don't have to rehearse it into the ground. But that's just the kind of people I usually work with. Other things have got to be rehearsed. I'm thinking of some of my bands is like other bands we rehearsed and played live and never and then recorded first and then played the stuff. So it really depends on what the concept is and how well they know what they're doing
Right. Yeah.
and whether you're a perfectionist or not, which I am not, but it has to be timed.
Were you about to say something, Tim?
Well, I mean, just talking about rehearsals. I mean, there's also obviously if you've rehearsed your whole life and you bring together a team and the music's very clear, that's still a form of rehearsal. And then, of course, there's bands I've been in, at least, that are just you're rehearsing all the time, just
for no better gain.
Well, no, because I think sometimes if you're working out the material, there's different types of rehearsals, right? And if sometimes you just want to stress test it, and by rehearsing all the time, you can realize maybe this isn't working. Because sometimes people will just be like, just throw things together, and it's hard to get perspective. So,
but the other side of that is the community of rehearsing. For instance, as I was saying before, teenagers would rehearse every day until it was perfect. But some of my other bands, Big Sexy Noise, Retrovirus, one rehearsal because the material not that complicated, and I'm dealing with musicians that know it. And then there's the other side of that, which Tim and I do a lot of improv, and there's no rehearsing for improv. You're either in the zone or you're not.
Right.
So, and that's another kind of zone.
Miles Davis' second quintet, he would rehearse them without him being in the room. He was like, okay, you got 3 weeks of just, you got to rehearse every day. And he'd be upstairs. He had that apartment in New York, and he'd hear it and come down, hey, change this. Dylan would do that shit too. Yeah. And then but he would be rehearsing them, but in a very different form, because he wanted them to get to know each other, and he wanted the telepathy to be part of it, and he wanted to,
of course,
yeah.
But also going back to Skin-Yard for a minute, I mean, those songs are not like basic punk or grunge songs. There is some complexity within them, which does make them more interesting than the average, blah, 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 blah. So there's some kind of interest in the compositional skill that you seem to have developed rather quickly after being in two bands you thought were terrible.
One band that I thought was terrible, and two that I thought.
What was terrible?
But yes, well, so when I was
you were just a youngster.
When I was in Tim and Orning and Feedback, it was the same year. I was rehearsing 6 days a week because each band rehearsed 3 days a week, right? So I was playing a lot, and so I was getting really much better at a pretty quick rate because I was playing.
Yeah.
And in both cases, we were writing all original music, and to a certain degree, rehearsal was a time when you actually collectively worked on actually writing stuff.
Right. Exactly.
And Skin-Yard was even more that way. We did a lot of writing together as a band. Like the majority of the material, maybe initially the ideas came from bass, but we would work on parts and arrangement, and that's where a lot of the work went into. Not just going A part, B part, A part, B part, double this part, boom, bridge, go. Like we would actually fuck around with what made sense and what felt right to the song, not necessarily if it abided by this particular, structure that you're supposed to do.
And that input is, I think, what also makes the tracks interesting, because it's not just like, look, I'm a musical conceptualist. I have an idea for a sound. I find the people that can complete it usually. That's why I'm doing, conceptual thing. But that's what makes it interesting with the Skin-Yard stuff. In review of the 7-inch compilation Skin-Yard Select that's coming out, only available through CZ Records. I'm doing a commercial for you. I don't know why. Is that you do feel that it's cohesive, but there is a variety in there.
Yeah.
And that makes it interesting.
Well, we did work because we were pulling from many years and many different drummers. And obviously drummers have a big influence on the feel. There was a lot of work that went into picking songs, not just that we would necessarily play to you've never heard my band, here's some songs. We wanted to do something that did feel cohesive collectively. So we're pulling from everything, and we want it to, like, if you play it beginning to end as a record, it makes sense.
Success on that front.
I think so too. Yeah.
Congratulations, my friend.
Thank you. Well,
I love compilations. I release them all the time.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a good format, because I don't know how many people have the patience for 7-inchers anymore, but It's
Well,
a
I mean, vinyl is in. I'm releasing a 7-inch with Phil Cavanno, Monster Magnet, Blitzspear, Shrapnel in a week or two, and vinyl is in. So I
yeah,
think it's going to do well. And plus, it's limited. Your
yeah,
edition is limited, so
yep.
people better get their ducats out.
It's limited to 1,000 copies, 800 on red vinyl and 200 on pink. And
What
people,
kind of does it come in a box? How does it? How is it? What's
it
the
comes,
enclosure of these of these
so each
things?
7-inch has a different painting by this artist named Mike Egan out of Ohio. And then it's beautiful, nice heavy sleeves, colored vinyl. And then they all come enclosed in a nice kind of heavy stock box, custom box with a piece of art he
Nice.
specifically
No,
did for the package.
and beautiful objects. I mean, that people want
Yep.
vinyl now. They want objects. They want something that's a little bit more special. So good look on that. So now, are you still releasing other stuff on CZ Records? I mean, because let's just go through the history for a few names that you have
Okay.
released in the past, which are like 7 Year Bitch, The Gits, which I saw that culmination of the Mia Zapata mystery on Dateline or something horrifying. And it was Eddie Vedder that put out this record to support the finding of what happened to her back in the day, which I
Mhm.
also was on, I have to say. He did contribute to that. Built to Spill, Coffin Break, Engine Kid, Hammerbox, Love Better, the Melvins, Presidents of the United States,
Yep.
Silkworm. Are any of these things still in print? Do you still release these things? What is up with what you do now as far as releases?
Some of the bands I've actually sold the masters back to them because between 2001 and 2021, I was pretty much not releasing records anymore. And
What were you
having
doing?
and having been in a band, like if nobody's going to put my music on and I still have a vested interest,
Yeah.
maybe the better thing is to say, hey, do you want to buy your masters back and you can do what you want with them. So a lot of those bands you mentioned, 7 Year Bitch, I still own the masters too, but the Gits bought theirs back. Um, Melvins now own their masters. Silkworm bought their record back. Hammerbox, Carrie Ackeray bought the masters
So
back.
when you said they bought their masters back, so what kind of expense did that involve? Just what you put into mastering it and getting it, cohesive, or what does that mean? Because I own everything I've ever done. That's just from threats or coercion, but that
It,
was me.
it would just
So
depend
how
on
did
the band. I mean, there's
right,
a couple of bands that didn't sell shit.
right,
And I knew I probably wouldn't do anything with them. So there was a few bands that I'm just like, hey, do you want your stuff back?
right.
You can have them. We did a contract just to say basically, we're wiping our hands clean of each other and I
What was
don't
your most successful release on
um
CZ, like back in the day, and then or up to today? And what is the status of it today, other
probably
than
7 Year Bitch. 7 Year Bitch, Built to Spill, and believe it or not, this funny little record that was the Kiss Covers compilation, which was the one we licensed from Waterfront. It's called Hard to Believe. That one sold just like crazy.
Right.
The funny thing is, I'm not even a Kiss fan,
No,
but
I'm not either.
um, I was talking with Waterfront regularly because I was working with Sub Pop in the late '80s. When they first hired me, it was Bruce, John, and me, and I was importing stuff from Waterfront and exporting CZ Sub Pop stuff to Australia. So we had this kind of back and forth quid pro quo. There we go. Thing going on. And they offered the Kiss Covers comp to Sub Pop, and Bruce and John were not interested, and so they offered it to me, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds cool. Um,
have you ever done any cover songs?
Skin Yard?
Have you ever done, yeah, Skinner?
Yeah, we did. Let me think here. We did a couple of different Bowie songs.
Bowie songs?
We did She Shook Me Cold.
Oh,
Uh,
great song.
which the CD release of our very first record has a live
It's a
recording
great
of
song.
that. Um, Let me think. We did Tales of Brave Ulysses by Cream. We did Day of the Eagle by Robin Trower, which was
Perverse.
actually really hard to play, but really fun to play. And we actually pulled off very convincingly a cover of King Crimson's One More Red Nightmare,
Okay. What?
which I'm gonna say
I
we're the
love cover
only
songs.
we're
I've
the
done
only
them.
Seattle grunge band to probably cover
Right.
King Crimson.
That yeah, sounds about
You know,
right.
one weird, I wouldn't call it grunge, but it was at that period in the 90s or whenever when like alt was top 40 on the radio. But I always think of it like this is my equivalent of almost covering Nirvana when I
Yeah,
covered Low by Cracker, which is, you know, about heroin, which I did twice in my life. That was it. But it's such a good song. And the video had Sandra Bernhard boxing the lead singer. But I'm
nice.
like, whenever I hear this version, but I've done, you know, I've done a whole album of covers songs. I love cover songs. Not to mention doing this whole tribute to the group Suicide for the past few years in Europe. But Low, I always think this is as close as I get to covering Nirvana. And even though it has really nothing in common with it, it just has that feeling to me.
Right, right. Yeah.
Like
Probably,
I'm covering a top 40 alt band. This is like ridiculous. But you know, it's always the lyrics to me. And it's interesting. Like I have a Rorschach test for people. I'm like, do you know this song? It's a band we all hated completely. Every one of us almost. They're like, no. But the music is totally traditional. And it's Get Back Shack by Steely Dan. Bleh. But my version, of course, much more sexy. And it's all about gambling. How can you not do this song? Anyway, just asking.
yeah, covers are fun, but the problem is then everybody wants to hear the cover and it becomes more popular than your original stuff. And that's the point.
Well,
That's the point at which you need to retire the cover
I've
and
never had that problem.
move on to a new one. Yeah, it's happened to us all the time. It's like, come on, Tales of Ray Ulysses. I'm like, all right, we're done. No.
I covered Black Juju by Alice Cooper for many years,
Oh,
Frankie
nice.
for many years. Oh, but I added a satanic prayer at the end of Black Juju. It was a great song.
That's my favorite Alice Cooper record, actually. Love it to
I
death.
love Alice Cooper. Like
So
I said,
good.
Alice Cooper over Alice in Chains for me. I'm just saying, Timothy, Timothy.
So in '91, I mean, when you guys broke up,
Yeah.
were you relieved or upset or indifferent?
Oh, well, I think I was upset, which is what led to me leaving the band.
Okay.
I
Okay,
was
that's
just,
the answer.
I was burned out. I mean, I wouldn't say I was upset, but you know, we had worked our asses off for like 6 years at that point, and it was exhausting. And you know, we got along when we got along, and we did not get along, we didn't. And you know, we did not tour well together as a band.
Oh, interesting.
That was always kind of, you know, there's certain people that are different people when they're at home versus when they're on the road. And I won't name names, but I'll just say that there was a dynamic within the band that was very often very tense when we were on the road. And so it was no fun. The other thing is too, is in '89, I became a parent, and I never liked touring much anyway, but dealing with that conflict of like, you're a band that if you actually want to be successful, you're going to have to start touring more, not less.
Right.
And then wanting
And
to
then
sort
even
of,
good luck, just because, you know, good luck at the crap game, you know, maybe.
yeah, yeah. But I also like, I didn't want to follow my parents' footsteps, even if it's not literally, but
You, my
still
friend. Good for
being
you.
absent. Like my parents were absent mostly because of their addiction. I didn't want to be absent just because I was literally physically absent. So
Good for you.
there was a bunch of reasons, but I mean, I gave notice. My last show with the band was in February, and then
February
of '91,
yeah.
and then they played their first show with their new bassist and their new sound. That's in air quotes for people listening. In April. And then like the last show they ever played in the United States was October. They went on a European tour. And I think their last show ever was in November in London. And the band basically broke up on the plane coming back to Seattle. And that was that. Like, so I was the first one out, but you know, that was basically foreshadowing what was inevitable anyway at that point. You know,
But people that aren't in bands also, they don't realize really the toll it takes. You really have got to be a born road dog or you're not to
yeah,
do it. Now,
yeah,
Tim and I are born road dogs. Somehow we
yeah,
just do. And we, of course, travel brilliantly together. Most of the people I've played with, no names, maybe one or two that just, yeah, they had to go. but you're either in it or you're not, and it's not the easiest thing. I mean, I would
Uh,
love. I'm trying to pitch this show called Road Doggin, which is follow me on tour because you can see how I go from a 2-star to a 5-star hotel, from a truck stop to a Michelin restaurant in the middle of Italy, in the middle of nowhere. Don't do this. Don't think you want to do this because you have no fucking clue exactly what
it's
it
hard.
is
Well,
I should
well,
do.
Lydia, nor do we have kids, and
Yeah,
and
well,
and uh, and having,
well, I
I
mean,
think,
we've had infants in our last band, but we had to get rid of it.
well, I mean, for Dan, for me, it's like, one deterrent of having kids was I wouldn't want to be as absentee dad. I want to be present, but I
Yeah,
also don't want to give up touring.
right.
So if I
But the
don't want to
reason
give
I
up
don't have
touring,
kids is because most of the people I know are infants, and if it
well,
doesn't fit in, it doesn't come out. And until you want to shit a watermelon, don't ask me to do it. I'm just saying.
I understand.
yeah.
Carry on.
So it's, yeah. I don't want to be bitter about it. I don't want to neglect a kid, nor do I want to give up touring. So there's
But
that.
that's a subject I just want to call a minute of attention to because people don't realize, I did a documentary called Artist Depression, Anxiety, and Rage, which I don't have depression or anxiety, but most of my friends, musicians, do.
Right here.
But the thing is, neglect is abuse, which
Right.
people think, oh, if they're not there, it can't. No, no, no. Neglect is another form of abuse. And in my situation, I neglected my abuser. So, like, I beat them at their own game. But people don't understand neglect is like the silent trauma that people don't often address when they're
Yeah.
talking about these subjects.
I
I'm glad you came out as well as you did because having both sides of the so-called family tree being as they were, you come out pretty good there, Daniel House, my friend.
I think I was able to do it because I had my label.
Because what?
I had the record label.
Yeah.
So like leaving the band was really hard because that was kind of at the core of my identity of who I was, right? It's like I'm the bass player and songwriter and co-founder of this band that I think we're doing some really cool shit. But I also was like, I can't keep doing this for, whatever the reasons were. But I wasn't complete, like I still had the record label and I was involved every day in that, and I was putting out a lot of music by, all these different bands that I loved.
By your true family, by your real family.
Yeah,
Yeah,
real fun. But
exactly.
so I still could be involved in the music and this whole scene that I was part of.
Right.
So,
Without getting hemorrhoids on tour.
right. I never got hemorrhoids on tour, but
Well, if you ever did, I would have helped.
I don't know if I've ever had hemorrhoids.
I
Well,
had
we
one
don't get
once.
those. It's just people that are full of shit that usually do. I'm just saying. So I'm getting frisky. We
Rim
always
shot.
I'm getting frisky.
Yeah, I don't know. So running label is cool, and I could continue doing that and sort of being involved in that.
So give us the absolute right now update. So you've got this
Uh-huh.
masterful, remastered,
Yes.
grand collection of Skin Yard coming out December 2nd. Order only, CZ Records. That's it. In a beautiful box. And what else? So what is the other recent developments that you've been doing in general since not being on tour and not having your own band? So what else?
You
What
mean
else has
like
been going on in the last few years?
you
So
mean
now
like
you're in
life?
San Diego.
Yeah. Yep. Let's see. Well, I moved from Seattle in 2003 and had a whole professional life doing web development and digital strategy with music and entertainment stuff, and then in healthcare. And then I was like, fuck this shit. Let's go to Joshua Tree and see if I can live the life of an artist, and actually designed and built a house and had a separate building that was like 1,100 square feet. And that was going to be the art studio, and that was going to be the music studio. And
Fantastic on that front. I love architecture and great that you actually did it. So then did you sell it and get out?
I did. Yeah.
Good.
And it's the only thing I miss about the desert is that house, because that was a dream I've always had since I was a little kid, and I got to do
Amazing.
it, and that was really cool. But I've just kind of been in San Diego trying to figure out like if I'm gonna start. I mean, I've put out 2 releases, the 10-minute warning record and now this one, and I don't know if I'm gonna do more stuff or not, because it's not really viable for me to do this as like a
Yeah.
business. I'm not gonna have employees, but the whole way that I got into the label stuff and putting out bands in the first place was as fun, more as a hobby, not as a career. And
Well,
it's
maybe
so
you
much.
should go back to architecture because when people ask me what's your suggestion for young musicians, I'm like, chemistry or architecture. Do not go into music. Stop it.
Well,
Stop torturing yourself. Play in your garage, release your own shit, use
yep.
GarageBand, leave it alone.
My next project's actually finishing a book that I've been working on for several years.
So, okay, so you have a book coming out early next year. It's a memoir.
Probably late next year.
Okay, memoir. Memoir?
No, it's an oral history.
Oral history.
It's an oral history of Skinyard because apparently I can't let go of this one part of my life, right? But I've interviewed like 60 or 70 different people, and everything's been transcribed and edited. Now I just have to sort of write the openings to each of the chapters and do all the assembly and start
Lots
shopping.
of photos.
There will be. I mean, that's once I'm working with a publisher, we'll get all that whole part together.
So is this your first book release?
Yeah, but I have like
You'll do more.
other
You'll do
ideas kind of in the mix right now. Once I get this published, I think that my new life might be more as an author. At least I'm hoping so.
Oh, cool.
I
And I
think
might
books are
still
so
play music.
important.
I might
Books
play
are so
music. Yeah, they are.
Well, wait a minute. Books are so important. So is making music. Books are so important. Oral histories are very important. People
Yeah.
want to know. They want to know what went down. It's one of the reasons we have the Lydian spin, because this is
Right.
like an oral history in the here and now about people that have been stubbornly relentless in the pursuit of creative endeavors, highly independent. And it's
Yes.
very important, these things to me, as well as continuing to make music, or in your case, you've released enough. Now you're releasing this compendium. I think it's very important to do this kind of stuff. And that's why we're so happy to have had you on the Lydian Spin, with Daniel House of Skinyard and CZ Records. New Skinyard Select coming out December 2nd. Get your orders in because it's going to sell out.
It
And
will.
then it's going to be too expensive for anybody to buy. So just do it. Maybe it'll be reprinted or pre-pressed. We don't know.
Nope, it will not.